necessarily reflect or represent those of the owners, management, or advertisers of Pacific Telestations Inc. This message has been brought to you by the stations of KUAM.
You're watching Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Welcome to this evening's show. I'm Jess Lujan, and tonight we'll be talking about the skull that was on display at the University of Guam, in particular, Pali Manuel Solorzano's skull. Let's watch a clip of last Saturday's display up at University of Guam.
Trying to say that you should feel proud of the Spanish influence.
Okay, in the studio here we have Dr. Mike Bevacqua, who's one of the lecturers, actually a professor at the University of Guam, Chamorro Studies, and he was one of the folks, the presenters, again, to talk about the skull as it was presented to the people of Guam.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here and see the video from the event on Saturday. I see some of my students falling asleep in the audience.
Oh, that's not good for a teacher to be watching.
They're in trouble. They're so in trouble.
Yeah, you know, and the reason why I asked you this because you wrote an article in the Marianas Variety. It's entitled Ilun Pali, basically Ilun Pali, and you talked about skulls, basically this and. How ironic that, anyway, I'll let you tell the story on not basically a story, but the beliefs, the Chamorro believes years back in the preservation of skulls, because what we know it now are 8x10s that we have in our living rooms, right? And even bigger ones now, the wider, you know, with these big frames that we have nowadays. But it was used, and how ironic again, how that it was discouraged at the time by the Spanish priests because it was devil worship.
Yeah, it is really ironic, sort of, that we have this skull that the church kept for several hundred years. When at the time when the Spanish priests came to Guam, Chamorros kept skulls in the home of their ancestors, and the Spanish were crushing those skulls and preventing Chamorros from keeping them. So it is incredibly ironic, you know, to kind of give people a sense of what it was like in ancient times. From what we know, Chamorros, their religion was ancestral worship. So you have ancestors. You know, after they die, they're still around you, and your connection to them is through their bones. So if you had a father who was a great warrior, you would take his leg bones and then you would carve them into spears, and then you would fight with those in battle. So then your father fought with you in battle. His spirit was with you. If the skull was the most important part. Okay. So that was like the big spiritual conduit. So you would take the skull after the person had, you know, been buried for a while, decomposed. Then you would take it into the home and you would keep it there. And Chamorros had a really close relationship to those skulls, because that was like, if you talked to the skull, you were like talking to your ancestors. And from the priests and what they observed, the connection was so intimate that Chamorros would take the skull with them into battle. So if you had, like, if you're going to go into a tough battle and you had an uncle who was a really brave warrior, you might take his skull with you and put it on the battlefield. If you were going to go out fishing, and you had an uncle who was a great fisherman, you might pull his skull out and then you would talk to it and you would say, you know, if you, I'm going to go out fishing today, I haven't had much luck lately. If you help me catch a lot of fish, I promise I'll give some to your, you know, to your wife and your kids. You make a deal with the skull. Sure. And then hopefully if you catch a lot of fish, then you got to pay your pay your part of it. You got to comply with your deal.
So you're making a deal with the spirits, basically. And the skull represented the spirit.
Your connection, your link.
Yeah, okay.
And so the connection with the priests observed that the connection with Chamorros and their spirits was so strong. There was one story about how a Chamorro guy, when he was walking along a cliff, he fell. And I always ask my students, if you fell off a cliff, what would you say? You would probably say, "Ah!" or you would probably curse. I was about to curse, but you would probably curse. You know, you would probably yell out something. What the priest wrote down that this Chamorro guy yelled out was that he yelled out the name of one of his ancestors. And then he told his ancestor, if you've ever loved me, please save me right now. according to the priest, that guy survived. So his ancestor was on duty. His ancestor was like, I got this, I got you. So that's how close their relationship was, that they felt like their spirits, their what they called aniti, manganiti, were around them all the time, and so the bones were the connection. If you lost those bones, if it was crushed, it meant that connection might disappear.
So it wasn't the bone, it wasn't the skull basically that they worshiped, it was what they represented. They represented. So Mike, what you're telling me is very similar to what we have right now. We have statues basically, and the Catholics are often criticized in the sense that they're worshiping idols or statues, and really we said we're not. This represents the spirit that we pray to. These are emblems of who we pray to, but we're not worshiping those statues or their idols. They represent a being that we pray to. So kind of very similar, huh?
This is one of the reasons why eventually Chamorros they looked at Catholicism, and then eventually they kind of realized it's not that different than what we believe in already. So one priest said that after a major battle, Chamorros came willingly to be converted, and the reason they gave is because they said, you know, we were asking our spirits to protect us, but in the battle we lost. You guys won, so you guys have stronger spirits than we do. So
we want your spirits.
I was praying to my dad, my uncles, my grandfather, but I want to pray to all your dudes. You've got that carpenter guy, you've got that fisherman guy, you've got you've got all those guys over there. I want access to those spirits.
As well as mine.
Well, a lot of Chamorros did do that.
Yeah.
So the idea of saints and the idea of that's what made it easier for Chamorros to convert to Catholicism was that it wasn't that different. It's like, oh, so I have to give up my skull, but instead I'll take this, this little statue. Or eventually later I'll take this little prayer card. I'll take this little thing I put on my keychain. So you still have that connection to the spirit.
But you also said in the previous article before that as well that it was easier because of course we live in a matrilineal society here. So it's easier because we all and even in times back, Arguellos and Guelos, we all gravitated more to the women, to the women, and if you appeal to the women and the love and attention and the nurturing of a woman, and that's why you say that Santa Maria and Cumberland came about to be more, I guess, the dominant figure, even more so than because what you said in the article as well was the role of the Catholic Church was to basically martyr Salvatore basically, but Santa Maria and Cumberland outdid him.
It's true. That's one of the things I think. Chamorros eventually really accepted the church once the church really put out some of those female figures, which would have copied after or been sort of similar to Fauna or the Magahaga and stuff like that. I think that while the church was really putting out a lot of men, Chamorros weren't as connected to
the men.
But because Santa Maria, a lot of people think that Santa Maria Cumberland is the patron saint of Hagatna, but she's not. But she overshadows the guy who is the patron saint, which no one on Guam really remembers anymore, except maybe some priests.
Sure.
And so, but when you look around the island, you see all these Mary figures, these female saints in churches and so on, and you can really see that. Especially in Santa Maria Cumberland, sort of Chamorros still, even if they are Catholic, there still is that veneration of that strong, powerful female figure, that protector, that nurturer.
Sure, and again, as you see, really Catholicism came about basically here as a result of colonization, of course, the Spaniards, priests, of course, the Salvatore, of course, but. Again, there's now in churches they're praying to Pali Salvatores now, but it just came about recently. It's not. True. It's taken this long. So again, as you said, the female figures are predominant. Whatever Mary form there is, Santa Rita, right? Santa Maria and Cumberland, Santa Lourdes, all the female forms.
See, it's so interesting because in that, the Mary versus Salvatore, you can really see the complexity of Chamorro identity. How You've got like all, like, because some people, like I've had students who basically after taking my Guam history class, they refuse to say the Salvatoris part in church.
Yeah.
The one that's recently been added. They just say, you know, I know I'm a Catholic, he brought Catholicism to Guam, but I know what he did, and I know it hurt a lot of people, so I can't say it.
You can't say it, yeah.
But then they don't really question anything else. It's like, oh, but
Yeah,
Mary is,
yeah.
you know, that's important for my grandmother, for me, you know, and
Yeah.
so on. But you can really see how complicated identities can get there, where they're like, I don't like Salvatoris, I don't feel connected to him, but this figure,
Yeah.
Santa Macaman, then I feel very connected.
Mike, I got to pay some bills, or Doc, I got to pay some bills. But when we come back, I want to talk about the ironic thing about at the time when the Spanish priests were crushing the skulls, but in the same token, the priests that were dying off or that were getting killed off, they were sending their skulls back to their homeland. How ironic. Be right back.